Hi, I'm Bob Geller. Thank you for joining our podcast, PR Done and Dunner. On this show, we sometimes like to take a deep dive into certain segments of technology. And today I'd like to focus on the Insurtech space, one of the most interesting areas of fintech. And today we'll do it a bit differently. We're hosting a roundtable. So I want to take the pulse of Insurtech and do a deep dive by inviting key stakeholders from different areas of the ecosystem, all serving very important roles, all with very impressive backgrounds. And I can tell you lots about them, or maybe it's better to have them introduce themselves. So maybe we can go around the virtual table and start with Mark. And Mark, maybe you can give us 30 seconds on who you are and your experience in the industry.
Absolutely, and thank you. I have been a journalist for a very long time, though I've covered insurance for about 12 years, and at least a good part of that in recent years focused on Insurtech for Wells Media and then for Key Media.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And David?
So I got into the Insurtech space from an Insurtech startup. We grew a startup in loss control and safety until we sold it to Everest. And I got onto the entrepreneurial support side, supporting the Silicon Valley Insurance Accelerators programs, and most recently launched InsurtechNY. We're the largest community in North America that connects insurance carriers, investors, and Insurtech startups.
It's a great organization. We've been to a number of their events and met some great people through their events. And we know Mark previously through our work in PR and his work in journalism. Layla, I'm meeting you for the first time. It's great to meet you. Can we hear about your background?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So by trade, I'm a data scientist. I've spent 8 years developing very interesting models in the Middle East before I joined insurance, because that's the most logical way, right, to move forward from data scientist to being an underwriter. So I worked in insurance since 2016 in property casualty specialty lines. My first company that I've established after leaving sort of corporate insurance job is a insurance software development. I call myself a true insurtech, which is our technology. And so we work with a lot of insurtechs and their technology teams. And then now I actually decided to have my own insurtech. And so I'm running a transactional liability insurance MGA that is focusing on mergers and acquisitions, and then insurance that covers those exposures.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you all for attending and for joining our panel. And we'll be hearing more from each of you about what you're working on now and what's coming next. But first, I want to start with a very simple question, hopefully a simple question, in that some find the insurance industry in general, maybe InsurTech even more so, kind of cryptic, unapproachable, hard to understand. What is it about? Why is there excitement about InsurTech? Does anybody want to just take a moment and explain what InsurTech is and why we should care about it beyond folks in the industry?
Sure, I'll take a gander at that, Bob. So the best way to think about InsurTech is maybe through an analogy or another lens, right? So if I take the lens of the transition from retail to e-commerce, I think InsurTech is a really good analogy there. So everyone knows about that they used to buy things at Walmart and Target and Best Buy and Circuit City, and now they spend most of their time on Amazon and Etsy. And InsurTech is about that transition. So most people in their insurance transactions are familiar with all the big brands, right? Allstate, State Farm, Travelers, Nationwide. And InsurTech is about moving that transition into the digital world. So some of it is helping Allstate and Nationwide to launch new products and new capabilities to help the next generation of Gen Zs and Gen Alphas to feel more at home with the insurance industry. And then the other side is the digital distributors that want to sit right alongside the Nationwides of the world with their own products that are unique and tailored, whether it's the Hippos or the Roots or the Lemonades of the world. And what's really interesting to me is that's just for consumers, on the business side, that exact same thing is happening in parallel as well. And I think Layla's company is a perfect example, right? Like most people have never heard of insurance for mergers and acquisitions, but because of the brand that she's going to build, anytime a startup that's looking to sell wants to sell, they're going to say, you know, Quantum Merge is the company I want to think about. So when I get bought, everything's good on both sides.
That's great. David, you've done this before. Now, that was a really
Maybe
good
once
overview.
or twice.
Anybody else want to add any color there? Or that was a pretty good explanation.
To me, it's always, it's the best way to translate it is riffs off of what David said. It's if you look at Amazon, if you look at Apple in particular, and the customer experiences they've developed, and also the back end systems they've created for their own processes, it's basically putting those same kinds of ideas into insurance, as I see it, and trying to make those things, you know, whether it's for customers or people, underwriters and others on the back end, just to make things a whole lot easier and simple. The word that I've heard so much this year is delightful, but that's what they're aiming for.
Delightful. Okay, good.
I would add to that. I'll agree to, you know, with all the statements here, but what I'm noticing and why I switched to InsurTech as well is because I felt like InsurTech, it's an ecosystem of people that were really, really tired of waiting for a very, very long time for their departments to actually make a decision and execute that decision. Because if you look at large organizations like CHAB, AAG, and you know, just large insurance organizations that have been there forever, they have the money to actually invest in technology. So the money is not the problem. The issue here is the speed of implementing that change. It just takes forever for them to respond to emails to each other and then just make that decision because there are so many people in the process. And I feel like InsurTech is essentially on one layer of it is talent, right? People that are moving fast, and that's why they're getting together, taking the risk, and you know, organizing themselves in this organization that we call InsurTechs, because they've understood the problem, technology problem, because nobody can make a decision with regards to technology in a large organization fast enough. So it's much faster to move in a small unit like InsurTech. And I believe no matter what it is that we are addressing, as long as it's a technology that is focusing on a problem between insurance actors, that's the InsurTech.
Great. And it'd be good to maybe take a little bit of a look back and also look today. I mean, I know years ago when we got into the business supporting clients in the InsurTech space, that the industry, the insurance industry, got pegged kind of like as technology laggards. And I'm sure that's changed now, but where are we today in terms of insurance adoption of technologies? Has it caught up with other areas? Is it steamrolling ahead?
From the outside looking in, as someone who's covered this, I think personal insurance, you know, property casualty on the consumer side has probably gone a lot further. Okay. Commercial insurance is just getting started to a greater detail. So the commercial side is much more behind.
And I would maybe extend Mark's assessment to say behind commercial insurance is life, term, permanence behind them, and all the way in the back is health insurers, which my belief is that health insurers really don't want to make the changes because they're very happy where they're at.
Are they not being threatened by pure play InsurTechs, or do they not have to change? Or
Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, United Concordia, even Kaiser, they're so big, they have so much regulatory advantage that I don't see a startup health InsurTech happening in the next 5 years, maybe in the next 20. But the amount of capital and the vested interest of the networks is going to prevent it from being an easy task for anyone to want to do. I mean, probably the closest have been Clover Health and Oscar Health, but they were even carved out as very small pieces of the market.
But also to that point, we have to remember that all of these large insurance companies, and I'm speaking with the M&A background, right? they have the M&A strategy. And so a lot of them in the recent years, they've established these VC arms that are actually going and looking for these innovative insurtechs or partners that would, potentially help them just embrace that technology. So I think that, yes, they are not in a rush to innovate, but also they are investing already or partnering with these insurtechs. And in this way, they're sort of creating alliances to make sure that whenever they reach the point that they need to future-proof themselves or they need the technology right now, because of the amount of capital they have, they can acquire those companies. And that's what also insurtechs know very well. I mean, look at how many insurtechs actually exist past the 5-year mark, right? I mean, all of them either exited or failed, or they've become a carrier, because right now I feel like it's a new trend. We start as an insurtech and then let's become a carrier and the reinsurer, and so yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Based off the data I saw on PitchBook, there's been almost 400 founders who've had more than 200 insurtechs that have been acquired since 2015.
Maybe that brings us to today and what's happening today, because we know that, or at least we've heard that valuations are down, maybe stock prices are down in certain areas. Forbes said in June that the past year has been full of challenges. They cited stock market prices for insurtechs and funding trends. On the other hand, NTT data wrote in June too that the market bloomed in Q1 of this year, and this was the best first quarter of almost any year for insurtech since 2016. So, is the glass half empty? Is the glass half full? For lack of maybe public markets and maybe VC interests, are strategics becoming more important? Strategic investment? What's happening in the industry today?
If I were to look at this from a supply and demand perspective, I think that will help explain the gap that you're seeing, Bob. So yes, there is a structural thing that's happening in the economy where we have high inflation and valuations are down, but the amount of capital available from venture capitalists to go into startups is very high. There's essentially, on an overall VC level, more than $300 billion in dry powder, as in money that is able to be called by venture capital firms to invest in startups. And because of that, and the way that venture capital firms work
across sectors, I'm sorry, is that across sectors or is that in fintech?
Across sectors.
Okay,
yes.
Got it.
Yeah, and in InsurTech, I don't have the exact data, but I can tell you that it's at least 3 billion in InsurTech that's dry powder out there. And that's because you have these large corporate venture capital groups like Munich Re, or you have, we were just talking to earlier today, RGAX, that either have strategies where they invest direct into startups or through other VC funds that they want to deploy capital. And because all of that capital is available, it's looking for a home in a startup. And how VCs are structurally set up, the majority of the compensation for the people that run the venture capital funds is by the returns that they get on invested capital, not on just sitting and holding capital like an investment manager, a hedge fund manager. So ultimately, in order to be competitive, they still have to do deals. So I believe that's what we're seeing, is that even though there's a pullback in the economy, maybe some of the valuations are down, investments still have to be done because that capital still has to be deployed.
I think even beyond that, it's not that investors are pulling back, it's that they're looking at different things than they did a couple of years ago too. Companies that seem to be drawing more attention from my perspective are ones that help fulfill like specific processes. There's one in particular, like Relativity 6 is a startup that dealt with industry classification as part of the underwriting process, and they've gotten attention, and venture capital is a very distinct process, and it's and they're growing and they're doing well. Larger companies like the I don't think there's as many lemonades that are starting up though, like they used to, companies that were meant to be insurers that solve every problem and
big bets. Yeah.
Yeah, bigger bets that start from scratch. Companies that identify parts of the whole insurance underwriting process or the consumer side of things seem to be getting more attention.
I would like to add as well that first, let's talk about insurtech organizations. There are different types from the perspective of geography. There are a lot of insurtech organizations that were trying to enter US market and they failed drastically. I mean, many of them pulled their offices back to Europe. Like think about Omni US, for example. It was a great idea in Europe, but after a few months, or I don't really remember for how long they've been, like probably a year, maximum 2 in US, they just pulled back all of their offices because US was just a different animal. Lemonade as well, when they were expanding to the United States, they were failing until they hired very, veterans, industry veterans, to actually tell them what to do. I think what we need to remember is that I feel like insurtech business, it's a very opportunistic business. I see a lot of founders that just understand that they can make quick money, exit, and leave. And those founders burned bridges for all of us right now because they were not interested in sustainable models. They were not building businesses. They were building.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Aren't there a lot of hoops to jump through to launch an insurtech? It's not like the typical MVP move fast.
Well, but what is it's actually very easy. It's extremely easy. It depends, of course, whether you are like, if it's a broker portal, right? If you have your broker relationships, if you have your distribution, all you need is insurance license. I mean, in Canada, you don't even need anything, but let's think about the US. If it's an MGA, also it sounds very, very complex, but in order to build the base, you just need your producer license, you have your agency license, and then you sort of start negotiating capacity. If you get that capacity, you have an underwriting authority, binding your binder if it's with Lloyd's, and then you sort of start writing business. Is it easy? No. For insurtech MGAs, it's not easy for sure because they need to prove. But I love I'd love to bring up something that I've seen recently at Insurtech New York event. One of the panelists there mentioned that 40 years ago, the way to get capacity was just, approach your friend and say, give me the pen, I'll give you the money. Right now, you sort of need to show a bit more of the underwriting approach and statistical analysis, which is a bit tough, right? If insurtechs are trying to penetrate a very different space. But again, so there are different insurtechs. There are SaaS insurtechs that are not MGAs, that are broker solutions, that are, working with loss runs, or just SaaS. Think about the SaaS servicing insurance industry. And then MGAs is a very different animal altogether. We can go into that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that even though it is difficult, it's not impossible. And it's not difficult to establish an MGA or a wholesale brokerage. You can still be making money. But then if a company is being established with the whole purpose to exit within the next 3 to 5 years, they are not going to invest in the proper technology, in the proper strategy. They will be focusing on projections in the next 5 years to make everybody happy, because they know that capacity providers love to see inflated numbers. And that's why right now valuations are going down, because insurtechs are underperforming. And investors are understanding that, something has to be done with that, especially when the recession is around the corner. But also another factor to that is reinsurance capital. Reinsurance suffered tremendous losses in Q3, cat losses. Think about auto, think about public D&O. They are all going down, and they are desperately looking to find new ways to bring revenue. And, they are either exiting the market. Serious Point just exited, I think, auto, they exited, they closed a couple of offices. I don't quite remember, but it was interesting read. So reinsurance are also changing their appetite. And then they are sharing the risk. No matter where you go, you see the same reinsurers. So everybody is being hit. And that's why right now they are a bit more strict in the way they are evaluating their prospect partners, MGAs, insurtechs.
Layla, would you mind defining MGA for our audience, for some folks who might not understand what that is?
Absolutely. MGA is a managing general underwriter. We also have managing general agents. So underwriter has a bit more authority because they are managing, they have underwriting authority from the carrier. They can actually make those decisions on behalf. The reason why they have capacity is because carrier believe that they write better than the carrier. They have the technology or they have the brain to write it just better. And then MGAs, they have a bit less authority, but also they have the capacity to write it. So there's a very fine line between the MGA and MGU. So they are pretty much companies that I would put them in line with carriers, because when we are placing coverages, like let's say commercial coverages, we can go to the MGA, MGU, or we can go to the carrier directly. Usually when you are working with a carrier, you need to be appointed. MGAs simplify that process, so you do not technically need to be appointed with them in order to write business. That's why it's so much easier to work with MGAs, and that's why they've been historically an amazing and very profitable distribution for the carriers.
Thank you. Thank you. So what are startups doing now in light of a more challenging time, more challenging economy? Maybe VC funding is a little bit harder to come by. And Mark, I know you wrote about something about this topic a few months back. But
well, and as I mentioned earlier, I think they're focusing on solvable challenges in the whole ecosystem of underwriting and interacting with customers, rather than attaching the whole or addressing the whole thing, trying to create a new insurer from scratch. You're seeing more companies that address like customer facing platforms or aspects of the underwriting process, things that solve a specific problem that can be licensed or partnered with all kinds of whether it's brokers, agents, carriers, and embedded into their systems. I see that as a sustained trend. Basically lowering expectations to a degree, but targeting things that their potential customers will need and embrace, rather than reinventing the wheel. They reinvent a piece of the wheel.
makes sense.
So another trend I would add on to what Mark shared is really how startups are looking at what milestones they need to reach before they raise money. So it used to be in 2015 or 2016, you could go to one of the early insurtech VCs like XL Catlin's fund. And if you had a decent idea, a good management team, and maybe like you started with some good screenshots that you were building, but not even wrote code, you could raise money. And today, yes, there are people who have raised money on a PowerPoint deck, but they're more the outliers or the exceptions. What VCs are looking for today, at least at the pre-seed level, is they want to see that you've built some type of proprietary advantage. So if you're a software company, you have software, might not be patentable, but it functionally is something that if someone else wanted to build it, it would take them at least 6 months to build. If you're more of a data company, you have some proprietary data advantage and a path to be able to get that to scale faster than anyone else. And if you're actually in the insurance business selling policies, you have some indication that you're either very close to finding capacity from a reinsurer, or at least like you have the mechanism to get it done because you have the relationships, or you've actually sold policy one. And that's very different than when Lemonade and Hippo and some of these others like Branch or even Kin raised money, because there wasn't that same expectation. And then a lot of the investors that used to do seed are now doing Series A. And Series A used to be, you have a few enterprise customers and proof of concept. Now Series A is firmly, you have to have $1 million in annual recurring revenue, not just any revenue. So transactional revenue is weighed less than recurring revenue. And beyond that, it's not just your run rate, as in your last month was at, 90,000 in revenue. It's that your trailing 12 months add up to $1 million. And those really strict restrictions are making it so essentially founders have to either raise money early on from friends and family to make that progress, or founders have to personally use their own capital, which either means that they're not taking a salary or they're investing their own money in the company to get it to scale before investors will come in.
Makes sense.
I couldn't agree more. I would like to add what else to what else the founders are doing right now, especially since, yes, investors that traditionally were investing in even pre-seed, they want to invest in Series A because they know that a lot of insurtechs are falling apart before they reach even that Series A round. What I'm seeing on my side, first of all, as a company that is going through fundraising, and then looking at my portfolio companies through Zella, is that a lot of companies are overspending. They are entering the market. They're approaching the market, and they think that they need to spend all of this time on marketing, on attending conferences, so they are actually investing in presence, in their presence at those events, but then if you look at it, the ROI from those events is very little. Instead of spending on marketing through events, I think they need to be looking at their distribution strategy. Like, what is a distribution strategy? Your distribution strategy is not, I attended ITC or any of those conferences. Your distribution strategy is your partners. It's aggregated opportunities. So if you don't have that, it's going to be a bit more tough, and investors are looking at that. Also, as a technology company and as a CTO in Quantum Arch as well, I can tell you that a lot of companies, they are pouring money into technology, and they don't think twice that this technology increases customer acquisition cost. And so when investors are asking you, like, what is your runway, how much money you have left, you say, well, I poured 90% of that into technology that still has to be validated on the market. It's a really bad way of scaling or growing the business. So in insurance, you can write, especially for the MGAs, you can write a policy on a piece of paper. You don't need an amazing technology. Yes, it's great, but so a lot of insurtechs, they need to understand why are they entering the market and what problem they are solving before they actually pour money into technology. So I think right now it's going to be either we're cutting talent, and that's what a lot of insurtechs have done so far, or we're cutting budget on technology because we've achieved the point, like we are at the point where we can make money, we're self-sustainable. Let's just live through this crisis without overspending on things that don't necessarily need that investment.
Interesting. David, I'd imagine you must see a fair number of business plans and startup concepts. Are you seeing a different mix these days? Different kinds of ventures based on all these, the current situation?
So I would say there's two major trends in terms of different kinds of startups. So the first is that there's a lot more businesses that are in smaller niches. So for example, one of the companies that was a finalist in our startup competition was a company called Drafters. And actually, Layla got a chance to meet the founder, Audrey, at Target Markets. And their premise was pretty simple, which is that they were focusing on professional liability for architects and engineers. And I think back 5 years ago, one, there were pretty much not really any insurtechs other than Next that would potentially overlap with professional liability, even though their main focus is general liability. But that's a relatively small niche that it's in a smaller line of business, and it's also a subsector within that. But it doesn't mean that sector can't be extremely profitable, and it doesn't mean that that's not a good area to focus on. So the niches is definitely an area, and I think the other part that Mark had brought up a couple times, which is that there's a lot of software companies that are trying to solve one very specific problem. So for example, there's a startup in our accelerator called DataCrest, and they're similar to a company that was in our accelerator last year called Broker Buddha, which for the MGAs and small carriers, they're just solving the problem of how the agents are able to get their paperwork and submissions to the carrier to be able to have that underwritten. They're not holding all of the data, they're not holding the whole policies, they're not holding the agency's information, but they're literally just a transaction layer. And you would think that sounds like a really small problem, but every agent communicates with every carrier at some level. And a lot of times it's very inefficiently done. So that could be a great niche. So I think finding the riches and niches is definitely one theme. The other theme that I've seen is a pretty prevalent thing, is that founders' profiles are very much more insurance looking than technology looking over the last 2 years. So there's a lot more founders that I'm seeing, left Arch or Markel, or they left AIG, and they have a great idea, like Layla was talking about. They couldn't get it done internally. So they're like, I'm just going to do it myself. And that's very different than early InsurTech days, where it was a tech person out of Silicon Valley that heard InsurTech was hot and they were getting money. And they're like, oh, why don't I try and build a technology? And frankly, like, they didn't know much about insurance, and they had to like hire someone as their like 5th or 7th hire for insurance to backfill all that they didn't know. It's now the opposite, where you have insurance people that have really good, strong discipline, and they need help on figuring out the technology. So they build or partner with others that help build the technology. And now it's a lot easier because there's a lot of no code platforms, and there's a lot of agencies out there that can help people to backfill those technology skills.
Interesting. Speaking of technology, I mean, have you seen a difference in the mix of technology or any new technologies entering the scene apart from the mainstays of artificial intelligence, maybe better document management?
Yeah, so if you were kind of to look around the universe, if you're saying like AI and blockchain and natural language processing and IoT. So IoT was pretty popular, I would say, about 3 or 4 years ago. And there was a bunch of the carriers like Hartford and Munich, and they really leaned in on IoT. And that was like going to be the solve all for everything. It's like, if you put a water sensor in your house, no more leaks. If you use the home security, no more theft. If you have some kind of heat sensor or like a smart smoke detector, no more fires. And that really didn't pan out because, one, IoT was way more expensive than people thought. Some devices are more expensive than some policies. And the other challenge was adoption. Other than Hippo, no traditional insurance carrier has really figured out mass market adoption to get the homeowners or the commercial policyholders to actually implement IoT. So IoT is like, if it's a what's hot, what's not, it's a what's not right now. But what's really becoming popular now is natural language processing, especially in areas that are very much human-centric. So you think about workers' comp, right? The workers' comp interaction with the case manager is a human interaction. It's a conversation to figure out what medical care, how many days people are going to be off. Are they going to go back to light duty before they go back to their regular job? And that information needs to be systematized and organized in a way that the carriers can process it and triage it in an efficient manner. Natural language processing is a really good solution to that. And a lot of other areas where you have lots of either technical jargon or triage that needs to happen, that a machine could assist humans to be able to handle more problems at a time.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have a client in that space called Core AI, and they're doing a lot in conversational AI and chatbots, and insurance and healthcare are segments that they're working in.
I would agree with NLP, but also what we need to remember is that it's extremely difficult to implement. If there are a lot of companies that are entering the market, and they're saying, okay, well, we have this great technology. They don't, because in order to service like healthcare, what is a healthcare? You know, in order to actually train that algorithm, you need to, first of all, you need to have just enormous amount of data. And then you need to have enormous amount of talent that will be cross-checking every single result that the algorithm spitting out. So that's years of training. Now, none of these insurtechs that are utilizing NLP have access to the data unless they were working for a service company. They had a service company previously that was servicing and anonymizing the data, or were like automating something with large carriers, which also they cannot use because it's privacy laws, and an IP belongs to the carrier. I mean, the data belongs to the carrier. So that is extremely important. I believe that NLP will become the next sort of level of automation. Everybody needs to have the technology, especially if you're a large carrier. But then if you're a smaller carrier, if you were, opened up in the past, 10 years, you're already digital. So what I see a lot of experts are doing, they go and they talk about this technology, and everybody's using the word AI and NLP, but it's not. All we do as technology people, we parse. In order to parse information from a PDF document, you don't need AI. There's just so many buzzwords that are being abused by people in this industry, and then investors, because they are not really familiar with that, they believe, they just follow because this is something that they read in sci-fi, and they just go with it. So we just need to remember that. I agree with IoT, absolutely. I mean, a lot of carriers, they have the entire departments, like R&D departments, that are trying to figure out what to do with the IoTs, but it's extremely expensive because it's hardware. Hardware breaks, hardware has liability, different type of liability. It's a hardware. But I do think that AI and it is something we need to be looking into. Recently I've met a company, not recently, quite some time ago, Cysurance, and I'm a big fan. They are somebody who doesn't really come up during the panels because they are captive insurer. So they offer cyber. And if you look at their technology, when the CEO speaks, Kirsten Bay, when she goes and when she talks about how she provides this cyber liability, she built this cyber warranty. She actually talks about insurance. But if you look at under the hood, it's a blockchain-based technology. Tell me one company that actually managed to prove that blockchain works.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Go ahead. I
was going to ask Mark, because I'm sure he's seen a fair number of PR pitches and vendors about revolutionary technologies.
More than I can count, but to me, the most useful things are to consider in terms of tech are continuations. Embedded insurance, the things that focus on distribution that will continue to and probably even increase and become something ubiquitous. The idea of reaching customers, through partnerships with auto companies and retail establishments and other things where you can embed a link to buy your insurance and all kinds of retail experiences. The other thing I think that's worth noting is APIs, the ability to connect to clients so they can use your software. I don't think I've ever expected to hear API so often in all of the pitches I've gone. And I don't know that they're all proven, but I think that's a huge direction in terms of companies that are seeking partnerships to expand their reach. Because in theory, if APIs work, as I understand them, that it allows for easy link up and use of the company's technology. And perhaps that'll become ubiquitous too. I don't know if the other panelists have some thoughts on that.
I love embedded products. I do think that embedded products are the only ones that actually nailed it.
What does this mean? Is that middleware? Is it under the hood? What is embedded?
It's pretty much when you are buying, like, when you buy your Apple phone, They offer you
Oh, yeah,
Apple
yeah, yeah, yeah.
protection. And so that is
Yeah.
like, they are embedding the product
Right.
into the insurance into the product. Amazon right now started doing that. But that is excellent, but that is a part of the distribution strategy, right? I mean, right now, I feel like embedded is a buzzword again, because if you are building your distribution, it should be absolutely your distribution, a part of your distribution strategy. And embedded, like, yes, you're embedding it into your partners, into the products of your partners. So, you know, it depends how you position that. One of the companies that I've met recently, and everybody knows, Ty Sagalo,
Sure.
he like truly figured it out with embedded, for example. But the reason for his success, you know, I want to make sure that we don't forget that he is very well known in the industry. And so if you look at products that succeed, and even Lemonade, I mean, he was there.
Yep.
Whenever you want to expand, whenever you want to embed or implement any technology, or if you want to enter the market with writing your policy on a napkin, you need to have an insurance veteran who is very well respected. Because in insurance, it's extremely small community. You need those gate openers. So if those tech founders didn't have those, you know, like supporters who were backing them, insurance veterans, I don't think that, you know, their strategies would be so successful.
Interesting. We're getting close to the end of our segment here, but before we wrap, I wanted to ask the panel, I circulated some questions in advance. We didn't get to all of them. Are there any questions I asked that you'd like to discuss now that you've thought through? And if not, that's fine. I mean, what I'd like to hear from each of you actually is more about what you're looking for in your next project. And I'll go, you know, person by person. There's some specific questions like Mark. I think the startup world would love to hear from you in terms of just a few quick tips as far as reaching journalists and getting their coverage.
Well, fair enough. And just, you mentioned next steps. I'm now freelancing and looking for new experiences in insurance and technology. But to insurtechs and startups who want to get the word out about what they do and what their product is, and why they matter, I encourage a couple of things. First off, avoid as many buzzwords as you can. You all within.
Is that possible in this world in insurtech?
It is, and start with the word solution.
Okay.
That is something I've heard every entrepreneur, every company exec, everybody says the word, and I'm sure it started at some point as a catch-all, because you're solving problems, creating a product that helps make people's lives better. So solution kind of fits, but it doesn't say anything about what you're doing, what your product is, what it does, and why it matters. So my encouragement there would be, just say, is it a product? Is it a service? Is it consulting? Is it an MGA? Because for a lot of these things, you're trying to reach other people in the industry, but also people in the industry who may not understand all of the buzzwords. So that's something that's important to keep in mind.
That makes sense. And Layla, what is happening with you, and what's happening with Quantum Merge? What do you think will happen next? Are you far away from delivering product or from delivering your service?
Our goal is to start writing in January. We are very close. We are in conversations with capacity providers. I must say that I've started very late. It's just the beginning of October, and just understanding how fast this industry is moving. I am aware of the fact that probably some of the capacities aren't going to come through as fast as I want to, but I think we're on a good track to start writing in January next year. Excellent.
That's not too far away. And David, what is happening with InsurTech? First of all, Layla, do you work with David at InsurTech? Are you part of InsurTech New York?
We actually, Quantum Merge is one of the, we are part of the cohort, yes.
That's
of
great.
The MGA lab, yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I know David introduced us, so thank you, David, for that. And David, what's happening next with Insurtech New York? I think you have an MGA demo day or something coming up, or what's
Yeah,
happening?
so three things for us. So in order of time, so November 14th is the distribution day for our MGA lab company. So they're going to get a chance to meet with retail brokers to understand how they can distribute their products, and also some embedded providers as well. November 15th is the demo day for our accelerator and our demo day for the MGA lab. And Layla was kind of modest. She's the only company that got into both our growth stage accelerator and our MGA lab at the same time. So she doesn't get to present twice, but she's definitely an honored company that's going to be presenting. And then the third thing coming up that's in New York is March 29th and 30th at Chelsea Piers is the spring conference. So this is our
Excellent.
annual InsurTech conference. We'll have about 1,000 people there. So if you're looking to block off your calendar, save the date, we would love to see you there.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to attend. I'm in New York, as you know. So at any rate, thank you so much, panelists, for joining and sharing your insight. It's been great speaking with you. We'll leave your information in the show notes so people know how to find you. And I guess what I'd like to say, if you like the show, please hit like, share it, post a review, comment. Thank you all, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.